I'm Em Sauter, better known as Pints and Panels.
And I'm Don Tess, better known as the Don of Beer.
Welcome to the 28th episode of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. This week on the show, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite, pumpkin ales. Visit allaboutbeer.com. Everyone loves pumpkin beers.
I love your enthusiasm.
Yay! Pumpkin beers. But visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And please, 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 if you're feeling generous, visit our Patreon, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others.
So speaking of supporting this show, this is usually where we ask our fans to rate and share the podcast.
You're right.
Do you think they're sick of us asking that?
Oh, probably.
Okay. So even though it helps us out, if people do subscribe and rate the show, hint, hint, we won't actually ask you to do it this time.
Okay. Instead, we'll just thank everyone for being a listener. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you very, very much.
Don, I know you got thoughts on pumpkin beers. So, because everyone's got an opinion.
Everyone's got... I feel like pumpkin beer is the pineapple pizza of beer. Like, it's very divisive. But I don't know. As a general rule, I'm not a fan of pumpkin beer because
Really?
I think a lot of them are poorly thought out. But like all beer styles, I think when it's done right, they can be quite good. And I have had some very good ones. I've just had a bunch of, not so good ones too. So how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, but I really like them when they're unique. I love pumpkin stouts. I think they're really, really good. I also think it's great the minute it gets chilly and you have to put a sweater on. I think they're really, really great for getting into Halloween. And I'm really excited to talk about with our two guests who know all things pumpkin.
Yeah, they're going to teach me what I don't know.
Because I bet, we're going to learn a lot of really interesting things about pumpkin beer because a lot of people are like, oh, pumpkin beer, meh. No, like maybe,
Exactly.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really exciting.
I look forward to being told I'm wrong about pumpkin beer. So
yes, me too. If you would like to help support the All About Beer podcast, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com.
Hi, this is John Hall, the editor of All About Beer. This episode of the All About Beer podcast is brought to you by Estrella Galicia. And I'm joined by Xavier Cubello from the brewery to talk a bit about the importance of beer culture. Welcome, and I'm hoping you can share more about how Estrella Galicia works to help foster an appreciation of beer and how you interact with drinkers.
Hello. Yes, indeed. We always say that at Estrella Galicia we want to be the most loved beer and not the best seller. And for that reason, we need to help our distributors, sales forces, and the customers appreciating and loving the beer as much as we do. For that reason, we carry on constant trainings and tastings of different styles, not only our beers, starting with our workmates, the first line of brand ambassadors, and also with our partners and consumers. I said we are not interested in being the most sold beer, but we actually do want to lead the beer culture in Spain. And our beer culture activities are examples followed by other brands. Starting with Mega, our museum, with almost 40,000 visits in 2022, tastings at our best on-trained customers, and as I said, trainings, many trainings. For example, I think I can say that we are seasonal certification program best customer in Spain and perhaps in Europe. It is compulsory that every Estrella Galicia new recruitment must follow a training in the first 6 months in the company, ending with a certified beer server Cicerone certification. No matter where this person works, everybody must know and love the product that we produce.
Thank you so much for that insight and for being a sponsor of this episode. And to learn more about Estrella Galicia, please go visit estrellagalicia.com.
ARP is Overlord of Brewing for Nebraska Brewing Company, aka NBC, overseeing operations at their production facility. His journey into craft beer began as a home brewer in the early 2000s, and eventually he volunteered his way into an assistant brewer position at NBC in 2007. Upon becoming head brewer in 2009, his focus on quality and process quickly put NBC on the map as the most awarded brewery in the state. Success of Tyson's barrel-aged products and expanding markets led NBC to open a packaging brewery in 2014, where Tyson was integral into design, engineering, and implementation of the new facility. Since then, continued focus on team building and process standardization has allowed Tyson more time to focus on product development and streamlining procedures throughout brewery's operation. Welcome to the show, Tyson.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to discuss your pumpkin beer. Is it called Wick for Brains?
Wick for Brains is right.
I'm sorry, that tickles me.
I know. I mean, you got to have fun with these beers, right?
You cannot, I don't think you're allowed. I think there's a law. Like, you cannot have a pumpkin beer that doesn't have a pun for a name.
Fair. That's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I
We
think the
love funny
TTB
names.
actually requires it.
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry. Go ahead.
No, so you make a pumpkin beer called Wick for Brains. How long have you been making this beer? And then do you do any variations on it for your brewery or distribution?
We've been making this beer since 2008.
Oh, good gravy.
Yeah, I don't know when we started calling it Wick for Brains. It actually has an interesting backstory because there was another brewery in Omaha in the late 90s called Sharky's.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a pumpkin beer that I believe won a silver medal at the Great American Beer Festival. And they had gone out of business, and Paul Kavalak, one of the owners of our brewery, got in touch with their old brewer, and we got his recipe. So we kind of brought it back to life. Strangely enough, though, I guess back in the day, record keeping and whatnot was a little loose. So the recipe I got was more of a sketch of a recipe. So we had to reinvent it a little bit.
So how did you reinvent it?
The biggest challenge was the spices, which are probably the most important part of the flavor profile, were measured in shakes on the original recipe.
That could be anything. That could be anything.
You know, was that his dominant hand or his non-dominant hand? And how big were the holes in the shaker? So it took some trial and error to figure that out.
Huh.
But really cool thing that ties back into that, a couple of years later, we were at a local beer festival serving the beer, and totally unprovoked, I'd never even told that story about where the recipe came from. One of the people tasting it said, "Oh my gosh, this reminds me of the pumpkin beer from Sharky's back in the day." And so it was pretty cool that we were able to nail that.
That is interesting.
So how did you put your own spin on it? How did you take Sharky's original recipe, obviously shakes and all?
Yeah.
And what did you do to make it your own beer?
I mean, we really did have to reinvent the spicing from scratch. So a little bit of trial and error over the years to get that right. But we were going for more of a lighter bodied, very drinkable pumpkin beer.
Okay.
And honestly, I think was that 15 years ago now, there weren't probably pumpkin beers were still kind of a very small niche. So there weren't a lot of other examples around that weren't kind of in that easygoing category. So that's kind of the direction we went. I did add some oats to it to maybe give it a little bit more body, because, you know, the cinnamon and ginger, those are kind of hot, spicy spices. To me, that kind of thins out the mouthfeel. So I combat that with some oats.
Oh, interesting.
I've never heard anyone adding oats to their pumpkin beer, but that makes total sense.
I know some people put pumpkin in their boil, but that always seemed like a mess to me. So I've never gone down that path for mouthfeel. We just went with the malt bill instead.
So does it have pumpkin in it, or is it just the spices that make it a pumpkin?
No, we use a good portion of pumpkin in the mash.
Okay.
And anybody who's done that knows that that's a real nightmare if you don't know how to do it well.
So how do you do it well?
Exactly. That's the next question.
We had a lot of really long runoffs over the years with that beer. I just looked at my notes this morning from the very first batch we brewed, and I think, you know, it's like 2.5 hour runoff for a 10-barrel batch. And that wasn't the worst stuck mash I've ever had, but it wasn't a great day in the brewery. When we expanded in 2014 to start producing cans and a lot more volume of beer, Wick for Brains at that point became our most popular seasonal beer, where we were brewing probably 350 barrels. So we would brew round the clock, filling up our 120 barrel fermenters, and the brewers all hated it because the mashes were long. And so we slowly whittled away at adding more rice hulls, utilizing some beta glucan enzymes, doing a beta glucan rest with the mash, all those things to kind of get it thinner and flowing better. And honestly, it took a lot of years to dial that in, but this year we brewed the beer no problems at all, just like any other normal beer.
Oh,
It's so interesting with the trial and error of pumpkin,
yeah,
like the fact that you can now do it as a regular beer and how long that since you've been brewing it so long.
I feel like the brewing literature on pumpkin beer is maybe a bit thin, so that's why it has to be all trial and error.
Yeah, for sure. It's gummy and gooey, and it just fills up all the space in your mash in your lauter tun where the liquid should be flowing. It almost is like a sponge or something.
Why do you add the pumpkin in the mash? And you were kind of alluding to the fact that you didn't want to add it to the kettle. Are there, is that just practical brewing things, or?
Yeah, adding all those solids to the kettle just seemed like it would add a huge mess with the whirlpool situation and getting the liquid separated. I mean, at that point, how much of it are you okay with being in your fermenter? I don't know. It just seemed like it was going to cause more problems than it would solve. Maybe there's more flavor potential for the pumpkin, but the pumpkin is subtle in flavor anyways, although I do think it definitely comes through compared to beers that maybe don't actually have pumpkin in it.
Okay. Because when you're adding it into the mash, are the enzymes from the malt converting some of the sugars, or is it all
Yeah,
fermentable anyways?
the carbohydrate component in a pumpkin puree is not real high. I think it's only like 6 or 7%. Maybe it's a lot of liquid.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, I guess I'm always been leery of putting starch in my beer, so I put it in the mash to make sure there aren't any starches.
Okay.
Probably could research that more, but that's what we do.
Well, it works. I will not question you further on this.
Are you sure, Don? Don's the nerd, so he's the one that asks about the. He hears the words like beta glucan rest, and he's like, "Oh, let's."
Perfect.
Yeah,
I love my glucose polymers.
it's true. It's true. Your website says that your pumpkin beer like stands apart. With so many different ways to brew pumpkin beer now, and in 2023, how do you think Wick for Brains does that? How do you think it stands out versus other ones, besides being easy drinking, which you already said?
Well, yeah, and honestly, I think in my experience drinking pumpkin beers in my craft beer career, so a lot of people try too hard or try to go too big with the pumpkin beer. I think almost most of them are that way, where they're like super sweet or super highly alcoholic or just way too much nutmeg or whatever. Ours really does go back to that easy drinking nature. It's you're drinking a pumpkin spice beer, but you can have several and not be tired of the flavor because it's that balanced.
What's the ABV?
6%.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's most. I find most pumpkin beers of that. And what's the base? Like, what are you building on? Is it like an amber beer, or is it lighter? Is it darker? Like, what's your kind of base?
Yep. It's funny. Everybody always asks about base beer questions when I'm doing not normal beers, and I don't really think about it that way.
Oh.
Again, and I inherited this recipe a little bit.
Sure.
But I mean, you could say, I guess, in color, it's light amber. But when I developed specialty beers, I always just try to imagine the finished flavor profile and those ingredients that I'm trying to feature, and then work backwards to figure out what will work with that. So the malt, there's some caramel malt in this, but nothing really gets in the way or tries to dominate. All of that's kept very subtle to let the pumpkin and the spices shine through.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah, I never thought of that, because I think you're right, Tyson, that most people think of, well, I could add pumpkin to a porter, for example. That would go well. And they take a base beer and they add pumpkin to it. But you came about it differently. I think that's really great.
Yeah, and I do that with most beers that have strange, fruits or whatever in it. Like, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say when I make a fruit beer, oh, it's a fruit wheat beer, but I don't really think about it that way when I'm developing it. Okay. I don't like to just take something we already have and add to it, because I feel like sometimes there's more to explore than just that.
Right. So I think pumpkin beers have this weird stigma about them, particularly for established beer drinkers. I think a lot of beer snobs kind of look down their noses at them. Why do you think that is? And what do you wish beer people knew and appreciated better or more about pumpkin beers?
Times have changed a lot, I think, in regard to what we consider beer or what we want to be snobbish about. So I don't know if it's as much of an issue anymore, although, pumpkin spice gets a lot of hate just in
in the world
society in
broadly.
It
general
really
for some
does.
reason. I don't know why. I think everybody secretly loves pumpkin spice, but they want to act cool and pretend that they don't because it's, too common. But, you look around at the beer styles now and just, your pastry stouts and your smoothie beers and all that. Like, I feel like the sky is the limit and no one's too hung up on tradition anymore.
That's the thing that always bothers me when people get snobby about pumpkin beers, but then they're like, "Oh, give me that breakfast cereal imperial stout," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"It's this like it's like that meme with Pam from The Office where it's like
Oh,
this.
yeah.
You think this is this? They're the same thing."
It's true. It's true. So yeah, we don't really get a lot of people talking bad about our pumpkin beer. In fact, I've met a couple random people locally here this year that didn't even know I was the brewer of said beer. And they're like, "Oh man, I love that Nebraska Brewing Company's Wickford Brains." So I'm like, cool. That's
You're like,
awesome.
Thank
Huh.
you secretly.
Yeah.
Well, so then I guess that leads to the converse of the question I just asked. Are there people who, do you find that there are people who love the pumpkin beer and then that actually, because they love pumpkin spice, and then that brings them into beer?
I don't know if I've seen that transformation happen. I suppose it certainly could. We definitely know people that are the wait, anxiously every year for pumpkin beers to come out. So they definitely have their fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely know people who aren't beer drinkers, and then everything pumpkin, everything autumn comes out, and it's all they want, and I love that because it does bring in new drinkers. I think that's really nice, and especially if someone's going to a brewery and they're like, "Oh, I love pumpkin beers," and then you give them, "Oh, what about trying Oktoberfest? What about trying a different kind of beer, or spice beer, or pastry stout?" And then their minds explode and
Right.
new drinkers. So
Yeah.
Yay.
One thing that I think is interesting about pumpkin beers is that they still have a season where, a lot of beer styles are fine year round and you'll find them in breweries year round. But pumpkin beers, I mean, there are probably breweries out there that do pumpkin beers all the time, but it's something that still has that seasonality that only comes around once a year. And, that's fun for people.
when are you brewing your pumpkin beer and when does it come out?
So I say everything has a season,
Yeah.
but yes, season creep is real.
Mm-hmm.
We brew most of our pumpkin beer in July. And that became just from pressure from our distributors who wanted their shipments, by August to get it on the store. Because where it's nice that it is a seasonal thing and people get excited for it, also that season expires very abruptly and nobody wants to think about pumpkin beers come mid-November.
Yeah, it is a very finite season. Like the minute Halloween is over, if you
Yeah.
hand someone a pumpkin beer, they're like, "What are you doing?"
Especially ours branded with a big angry jack-o'-lantern on it.
Do you do varieties of it, like an imperial, or do you barrel age it? Do you add vanilla beans? Do you do anything with it? Or is it just, this is it, this is what you're getting?
I've done a few things over the years, but mostly we just stick with the standard formulation. I do have kind of an infamous beer that I did years ago at our pub called Press Your Luck Pumpkin Porter. And that was back when we were still fighting and trying to learn how to deal with the stickiness of the pumpkin in the mash. And because I like to taunt fate, I also put a bunch of rye in it.
Oh, good gravy.
Yeah,
because that's easy to brew with.
Yeah.
There's no bigger brew
I was
can
like,
there.
then I was starting to feel cocky. I'd been commercially brewing for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And I was like, I got this figured out. I can make a rye pumpkin beer and it'll be okay. Turns out it wasn't okay. That was the worst stuck mash I ever had on our pilot system. And I hoped that it would be awful and no one would ever ask me to make it again. But it turned out quite lovely. But I don't think I have made it again. I probably should do that now that I can maybe pull it off better.
With more rye this time.
Yeah, well, let's do it with more rye this time.
Press your luck more.
Yeah. Obviously, the showcase of a pumpkin beer is the spices. You did mention the pumpkin and some of the malts in it that support that. Nobody ever talks about hops in a pumpkin beer. How do you think about hops in your pumpkin beer, I'm guessing you're not putting, cryo mosaic in there or something.
No, we've always just leaned on something, fairly neutral just for some IBUs, and that's it.
Right.
The spices definitely bring kind of their own, a little bit of bitterness and heat and all the aromatics we're looking for anyways. So yeah, it's just the hops are just a balancing feature against the malt.
A little bit of bitterness, basically.
Yeah, not a lot, just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Do you do any other autumnal beers? Or just
yeah,
just
we
pumpkin?
do. Most years we do an Oktoberfest. Although that market's pretty saturated and it's even a shorter season than pumpkin beer. So we mostly do that draft only. We do a s'more beer called Gimme S'more that kind of leans into the later half of fall and into winter. So it's like a brown ale with vanilla and marshmallow flavors and all that.
So you make an Oktoberfest. What beers when it's fall that what do you want to drink?
I'm definitely an Oktoberfest guy. Fall's it's everybody's favorite time of year. The weather starts turning nice. The sun angle's lower, so you're not getting sunburned all the time. And beer tastes better outdoors anyways. So all the Oktoberfest memories and hanging out with friends, that's that beer still holds a big place to me.
I agree. Is it warm there in Nebraska now? Is it hot?
It has been. Today's the first day where the weather finally changed. We got a cold front, which of course brought all of the smoke from Canada. So
You're welcome.
Not even going to get to 80
yeah.
degrees today, which will be amazing.
That's awesome. So you're in fall mode now, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. Finally it's Wickford brain season.
Or since you have smoke from Canada, how about roast beer season?
Yeah, that could be a thing. I always joke with people when our pumpkin beer comes out late July that, first day of fall because pumpkin beer is out.
Oh, that's true. But I find, does your pumpkin beer, does it age well? So because it's such a short season that I always tell people to buy it if they see it and then hold on to it till October.
Yeah, ours holds up fine. There was a period of time we used to add some spices in the fermenter, kind of like you would with a dry hop, but we were adding spices straight into there. And we actually experienced some stability problems with those batches. So we had to modify, make sure the spices all go in on the hot side, which took some effort to dial in the amount because with the heat and everything, you're losing some aromatics and it changes the characters. But we got it dialed in and back to the flavor profile we wanted. Strangely enough, because we have so many fanatics that love the beer every year, for several years running, few of the same people would tell me every year, "Oh, you changed the recipe this year. Something's different about your Wickford brains." And I never change recipes if I don't have a good reason to. And the one year that I actually did change it to overcome that problem, nobody said anything. So I feel like I did my job well that time, or maybe not.
I love it.
Thank you. Don, do you have any other questions?
No, I love that story. That's a great story.
Everyone's like, oh, I can taste this in it.
Exactly.
There's not.
Yeah.
That's
and it's
not
it's been 10 months since you've had it and your taste buds and your memory aren't that precise, unfortunately.
Well, if people want to learn about Wickford Brains or learn about Nebraska or you or how they reach out, what social media or website, what's the best way for people to reach out?
NebraskaBrewingCo.com is our website, and we're probably most active on Facebook as well, so you can find us there.
Great. Tyson, thank you so much for all your time, and I look happy pumpkin season.
All right. Thank you both.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Chad Henderson is a North Carolina native and the original team member of NoDa Brewing Company. He has been the head brewer for the Charlotte-based brewery for the company's 12 years of existence and is also a co-owner. Chad's focus through the NoDa Brewing Company's beers and products is to deliver a diverse array of exciting beers that range from traditional to experimental, with an emphasis on quality and consistency. The brewery releases new beers every week and has evolved to operate out of a 35,000 square foot facility that will soon be expanded to 50,000 square feet, and a 60-barrel production system and a 5-barrel R&D system. The brewery has won multiple major awards between World Beer Cup, Great American Beer Festival, U.S. Open, and many other local and national competitions. Chad prides himself and his team on being both a dependable brewery and one that can constantly looking for new expression through beer while staying involved with the community through various charities and events. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you make one pumpkin beer at NoDa, correct? Or are there multiple? Because I know some breweries will tend to like change things. So I just want to make sure that I'm on the right page with pumpkin.
That's right. We make one main pumpkin beer, but we do variations of it as well. The other big variation of it. So Gorgeous is our main pumpkin beer, and it has an imperialized version that's 8.5% alcohol. That's just essentially a more concentrated version. It's the same recipe. It's just done at a reduced volume batch. And that's called Drop Dead Gorgeous. And then we'll have little random one-offs, or we'll have like barrel-aged versions or vanilla infused or put different spices in it or something like that. But those are the two ones that actually get packaged in cans and go on draft out to the market.
Okay, yeah, that's so like the vanilla and the barrel-aged ones are tasting room only, or
correct? Yeah, we just do them as kind of one-offs, and usually like in conjunction when we release it, like this year when we released our Gorgeous, we also had vanilla bean infused Gorgeous. So a lot of times we'll try to do a barrel-aged version of the Drop Dead Gorgeous because it handles barrel aging really, really well. Last year we did a rye barrel-aged Drop Dead Gorgeous, and we aged it for about 7.5 months, and it was really, really good. So it's little things like that, and it's mostly just to add some more intrigue to the tap room. But when we do things like that, it's usually like one physical barrel or maybe 2 barrels worth. So it's not really enough to do anything else beyond just the tap room release itself. But Gorgeous itself is actually our number one selling seasonals, and it actually even though we only have it available for like a couple months out of the year, it is usually in like our top like 6 to 8 best selling SKUs of the entire year. So we make a ton of it. I think this year we did I believe 16 turns, 16 60-barrel turns of it. So
Is Gorgeous
this wonderful gorgeous weather outside in Charlotte right now. It's in the mid-90s. So
it's
gorgeous
not
weather.
Yeah, it's I mean, I like pumpkin beer all the time, but it's I think it's like I'm in New England and it's like 80 something and it'll be 100 today. So we're not when I think that's why people get mad that pumpkin beers come out in August, and it makes sense that it would come out in August because you've got to prepare for it. But you know, we're like pushing
it's the market ultimately. It's just you don't want to lose out on placements. And with this being our biggest seasonal, the very first year I ever made it on production level with the brewery, we released it on October 1st, and we just kept it on draft. And then the second year we did a limited amount of cans of it, and we released it I think in mid-September, and our entire sales staff was like, never put us through that again. Like it was virtually impossible to get it anywhere because there was already a massive inundation of pumpkin beers and whatnot. So if you aren't early on to the scene with it, you just don't get to be part of it. A lot of people get angry or confused with it, and I'm like, listen, y'all are buying it, or your friends are buying it. So I mean, like the grocery stores wouldn't put them out if they didn't know that people were going to buy them anyway. So it's not our intention for the seasonality of it to shift so dramatically. But the reality of it, if we want it, if we want to function it as a part of our business plan, we have to kind of play to the rules of what the market dictates. So that's just what it is.
Right. Can I ask, is Gorgeous second runnings of Drop Dead Gorgeous?
No, it is not.
No, separate. It is. They're separate brews.
They are separate brews. Yeah, we always release Drop Dead Gorgeous considerably later. Actually, we're releasing Drop Dead this week on Friday. We do a new beer release every Friday, and we released Gorgeous at the July 31st, so just right before August kicking off. But this was the closest that we've done Drop Dead to conjunction to gorgeous. Usually it's like we release drop dead like in November or something like that. We give it a lot longer time. But yeah, we don't brew them simultaneously. We do brew all of our runs of gorgeous, and then we give it a couple of weeks, and then we brew however much we're going to do of drop dead as a limited run.
And the 7-month rye barrel version, did you brew that 7 months early, or did you release that like in February?
No, we released it the year following it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we basically ran it through until we were happy with it, then kegged it off, and then basically just kept it in cold storage until we wanted to release it at the in conjunction to the drop dead the next following year. So it's kind of like a predecessor batch sort of thing.
I see. Okay. Yeah. That's
Let
all I had. Back to you, Em.
No, Don asked the nerdy questions, and then I also asked the non-nerdy question. Well,
you asked
I don't
the
know.
fun questions.
I don't ask fun questions. Well, my question was, I mean, if it's so popular, why do you think that gorgeous is so popular?
I think a big part of it, and a lot of part of our success at NoDa in general, is a lot of the timing that we had when we opened up, and when we released gorgeous to start. It was really the first pumpkin beer coming out of like we were very early in the wave of the craft beer movement in Charlotte. There was other craft local breweries that existed in Charlotte before us, but by time when we actually opened up, Old Mecklenburg Brewery was only open for about a year and a half, and they were literally the only other ones around and whatnot. They were doing exclusively German style beers, and so all the other predecessing breweries had closed down. And so when we opened up, I had already brewed that beer a couple times on a homebrew level and done homebrew festivals with it and whatnot. And we're like, let's go ahead and kick this thing off and throw this on a year after we opened up. We opened up at the end of October. And it was just I think it was one of the first ones, but also I think a huge part of it is gorgeous really doesn't hit the same notes as a lot of other pumpkin beers do. Like when you do these fall seasonal beers, you kind of you have your Oktoberfest cluster of Marzens and Fest beers, and then you have your pumpkin beers. And unless you're changing the base style of the pumpkin beer up, a lot of them kind of still hit a lot of the same palate hits and notes and whatnot. And a lot of that is based on whether they use pumpkin or not, but if they use the right spice blend. And a lot of them use cinnamon, nutmeg, and then usually there's like a tertiary spice or a small accent spice blend. And when I was just a craft beer advocate and homebrew enthusiast and everything, I got so tired of all the pumpkin beers that we had available to us in the area that at the time it wasn't really any local breweries, and also it was just breweries that were shipping to this area. They all kind of had the same mantras, like this is like kind of light amber ale at the time, especially. Almost no brewery doing pumpkin beers were actually putting real pumpkin in them and sending them all over the country and stuff. But they always like, it's cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger, it's cinnamon and nutmeg and all sorts. And I was like, these all just taste the same. And then in a couple months, they're going to do the same beer but darker and call it their winter warmer with cinnamon and nutmeg. And so I got kind of fed up with it. I was like, I'm going to use real pumpkin in mine, and which adds a subtle complexity to it. But I was like, I'm going to make this like a really deep, true fall ambery beer. And a lot of pumpkin beers that, this is, 14, 15 years ago, were very light amber in color for the most part. And I was like, I want it to be really deep mahogany red. So I developed a pretty fortified specialty malt bill for the base recipe itself. And then I was like, I'm tired of cinnamon and nutmeg being in every single one of these. So I did my own spice blend that was inspired by pumpkin spices and inspired by a lot of the kind of the accent spices that I saw in a lot of beers that I like. And so there's no cinnamon and nutmeg in gorgeous at all. Every year someone tells me there is. I'm like, I make it. I promise there's not. But it's a blend of ginger, allspice, clove, brown sugar, and cardamom. And cardamom actually, I think, is the secret ingredient to it, because it adds like a nice little cola pop to it. So it still fits like fall. And I kind of joking, like it's like an autumn cola adultified, so to speak. And so even though it scratches the itch of like the pumpkin beer season, it really doesn't hit the same way that the vast majority of pumpkin offerings do. And I think like when you're doing the fall beer experience, when you're doing Oktoberfest styles, since it's a German style base, it's usually through Marzen or Fest beer. Like they're very they're very set in on like what the recipe entails. Whereas like with pumpkin beer, you kind of can do whatever you want to, but it feels like we've culturally kind of just like shifted into accepting it has to have these spices and it needs to, do this and that. And I think Gorgeous kind of like fits the box of it, but definitely rides in its own kind of flavor category as far as how it actually comes off. And when we released it, we were the only locally available brewery doing a pumpkin beer, and people just lost their minds on it. And I think that if you can hit a good positive note with your core audience, and then keep pumping it out, it just builds its own hype kind of organically. And then you couple that with the fact that it really doesn't taste much like any other beer that's in that same category. It really gives it momentum. And I think it's just that over the years of just doing it over and over again, it's just evolved into this major seasonal for us, and people just really look forward to it. And thankfully, it's a beer that isn't heavily jeopardized from shelf exposure and oxidation and all that sort of stuff. It's a very robust beer, so people can sit on it if they want to and everything. I mean, I really wouldn't recommend it that much, but like, if you find a Gorgeous 6 months after the release of it, it's still probably fine. So people can, they're not worried about as much of variability. It's not like a hoppy beer that's going to have wild, variation after it sits on a warm shelf for months. So all those sorts of factors, and then the fact that we won 2 GABF medal golds with it in 2018 and 2020, that was kind of the years where it really just skyrocketed, because it kind of coincided with having a larger facility and having better canning options and just being able to pump out larger volume. And so, people that had heard of Gorgeous before in the greater, North Carolina area, all of a sudden they could get it in mass, and it just had a really good reputation with it. And then all of a sudden you get some gold medals handed over from GABF, and it makes a pretty a good package to send it off to people who've had it for long term, and then also people who haven't had it before.
I actually was going to ask that, because I've noticed that you've won 2 gold medals for it at GABF.
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
My question was, why do you think the judges saw that beer and gave you? I mean, it was almost back to back. So why do you? They're looking for. I as someone who judges GABF, which made me sound like a total douche right now.
No, it's fine.
As a beer judge.
Yes.
I know, like, you're looking for, so like, does it tick the boxes of pumpkin beer as the written for the Brewers Association, or is it just, I mean, if you're winning medals, it's got to be a good beer. So
yeah, with no cinnamon or nutmeg.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so that's the thing. I think it helps it in the category, and there's some years that it gets completely bashed by judges too. I think it really depends on the judges panels and how well. Honestly, that beer is a lot of it comes down to like. Are we really dialing in our water salts and stuff like that? Because the astringencies in the spice load can be either like just right or overpowering. So, every year we kind of have to really, take a step back and be like, okay, do we want to repeat exactly what we did with all of our salt loads, with mash temp, exactly what we wanted to be like last year and everything, and we go at it from there. Because all those little subtle things can make something that tastes super nuanced and balanced go astringent or bitter and things like that. So there is some year-to-year variability on judges' cards from it, but I think the thing with it is when you're doing GABF judging, like when you do pumpkin spice category, you have to pick a base style, and I always just put it in American Amber, because it's kind of, you could argue that it may be like a stock ale too, is kind of its category, but it's a very good amber color. It looks really nice. It has solid malt backbone and all that sort of stuff. But the thing is, when you go down, you just don't say like it's an amber ale with pumpkin and spice in it. You have to say, it was brewed with, and then you get the drop downs to like, I can select clove, and I can select cardamom, I can select ginger. So when they get that beer, cinnamon and nutmeg aren't even on the table. They are in the other beers that people have to judge. But I think that Gorgeous has such a unique spice blend on it that those spices that that I tell on the entry form are in there, people can taste them because it does stand out against the cinnamon and the nutmeg and all that sort of stuff. Like, oh yeah, I get that cardamom, or I get the ginger in it has a nice pop, and there's definitely some allspice. So like, when you're, and as you're judging, when it's things like experimental or urban spice or pumpkin spice or chocolate beer and everything like that. A lot of that, I think, is does it fit the bill that you describe it as? So it's one of those things where, like, if it's coming off like an amber ale, and you definitely get the cardamom, you definitely get the ginger, you get the the allspice and the brown sugar. If you get all those things that I tell you that it has in it, and the underlying beer itself doesn't have any major flaw, it automatically kind of, I think it's not automatically, but like it has a high chance of getting a good score because it's doing what you say it is. I always describe judging on like GABF and World Beer Cup is more like a dog show than anything else. Like you have your breed standards and stuff like that. You're not judging the dog by which one's the friendliest or which one's like the cutest and everything. You're judging it like, do their ears come to the right point? Does their rib cage go down the right way? That sort of stuff. So it's like the people that may give Gorgeous a gold may not even like it the most out of the lineup, but they think that it fits the descriptor that we gave for it and the categorization that we put it in the best. And that's what classifies on whether or not you're getting the gold, especially on those styles where it's not like IPA, or it's not just like Munich Helles Lager or something like that. It has like that, you don't do all those drop downs and everything like that. So it becomes a multi-layered thing. So it's like, is the base beer good? And then do you taste all these other layers of what you said on it? And Gorgeous, I think, does a really good job of performing as here's a good solid amber, and you should be able to get nuances of all these spices on it and some underlying starch character from the pumpkin, and then hopefully it just, it hits their palate just the right way, that they don't find any major flaws with the presentation of that. And then it has a good chance of scoring high.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you talked about the base malts, you talked about the spices that you use. You even talked about water chemistry, which is something I would not have thought of.
Yeah, Don's like, oh baby.
Does the actual pumpkin matter? Pumpkin variety, pumpkin sourcing. Do you do anything to the pumpkin? Talk about the pumpkin.
So the very first time I ever brewed it was a stupid idea. A lot of the best things we've done in NoDa started off as a dumb idea, and we just kind of ran with it. And it gives it the heart and soul to make the project move forward. Because like we're all just enthusiastic home brewers and everything that just happen to get our dream jobs and stuff like that. So when you get a project that starts out with wouldn't that be dumb if we did this? We're like, yeah, let's try that. So the first time I ever brewed it, I was in my garage home brewing, and I told some of my friends that were going to come over I was like, let's make a pumpkin beer. And I was like, all right, everyone be on the lookout for the largest pumpkin you'll see in town, and text each other on who thinks they got the biggest pumpkin. And one of my friends found a 78-pound pumpkin. And I was like, that's it, grab it, and we'll, and he brought it over, and we emptied it out, and we used it as the mash tun for it. And I actually sort of mashed everything in this big ass pumpkin. And then basically like poked a hole in the bottom of it with a screwdriver and like filtered it out to lauter it over. And then when I got everything lautered over to the kettle, I dumped out the grain, and I noticed that all the meat inside of it had been caramelized from the heat. So I carved all the meat out, covered it in brown sugar, and baked it in the oven to make as much of like a pumpkin souffle or something with it. And I bagged it up and steeped it in the actual boil. And we did that, not exactly that, because obviously they don't make 7,000-pound pumpkins anywhere that I know of. But when we scaled it up, we had originally a 15-barrel brew house, and we just used canned pumpkin, which was just like hundreds of cans of pumpkin that we would actually roast in a convection oven and then bag it up. And that was a horrible idea, because I nearly fell in the kettle trying to pull the bags of pumpkin out, because once they soaked up all the wort and everything, they come like a couple 100 pounds of dead weight. And I slipped and actually kind of dropped the bag and fall. I was in the kettle, like my actual upper body, while the boil was still going on. So I had to grab on the spray ball to keep it going in. So yeah, it still haunts me to this day to think like how horrible of an end that would have been. And so we're like, let's rethink this. So we use still pumpkin puree now, but we buy it as like large buckets of puree, and we actually add it to the mash mixer. And on our 60-barrel system, we have a dedicated mash mixer, so it's like a big giant like pancake mixer. And so we mix it in there. We don't do anything to it. We discovered when we were on the 15-barrel that whether we roasted it or not, it didn't seem to do anything. And when you're using the pumpkin the way that we did, it's really adding like more like starch texture than anything else to it. It's more like, it's like an unsweetened pumpkin is just, it's a squash, so it has like this squashy, gourdy, starchy thing going on with it. And so we add that to it, and we throw like 350 pounds of pumpkin into the mash with it, and it's an absolute mess. And I don't know why every company that packages pureed pumpkin decide to make it the single hardest thing in the world to handle in bulk. But we're all wearing pumpkin at the end of the mash in and everything, and then we just let it go through a long sack steep, and yeah, it just mixes in really well with it. It usually causes quite a lot of pain in the butt with lautering and everything, because it does kind of congeal a little bit, but you do get that little bit of that like pumpkiny nuance from it that just has that little starchy character to it, makes the body a little bit richer, and you can taste that that little bit of that pumpkin like tinge of the like, well, just like if you were to bite into a squash or whatever, it's a very subtle flavor, but it's there, and it's more, again, I feel it's more of a textural thing, and honestly, like a lot of it too, we could probably make the beer great without it, but you would tell a small difference in it. And I think I feel it's wrong to call something a pumpkin beer if you don't have any pumpkin in it. So right. we have to use it, and then and then the malt bill is all designed to be a really robust beer. To be like, we have Cara Amber in it, we have Special W or Special B. Special W is this Weyermann's version of Special B. We have Vienna malt, we have Cara foam, we have a ton of Cara Munich. And we base it all on American two-row. So it's got this awesome, like really nice high caramel raisiny character to it to begin with, and then that just gets emphasized from that pumpkin. And we just try to get the water profile in to let all those things shine in it without letting it get a little too sharp in the back finish, so that the spices can kind of handle that out for it.
That's awesome.
It sounds delicious.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who think that pumpkin beer is just like a lazy beer, and then you dump a bunch of spice in it. And I hope people listening to this can appreciate how much not just effort you put into it, but thought you put into it. So
and also for what it's worth, thank you for saying that. The spices, we hand crack those too, so that's a whole other thing. And also you have to remember too, so like when I was talking about all those specialty grains, aside from Vienna malt and Cara foam, all those other grains are fairly high friability, or they're like, they have a lot of they're very caramelly, they're dark, so where we have to mill, it's not a lot of ventilation going on at all, and it's on the second story of our building, and so we're basically up there with like respirators on, throwing hundreds of pounds of this grain, and there's dark specks going over, and realizing we released this beer at the tail end of July, so we're brewing this thing like right as summer is coming into its epic fuck you phase. That basically like it's like 120 degrees feeling up there, and we're just covered in specks of dark grain matter and stuff like that, and then we have to then get ready to go throw a bunch of like, feels like Play-Doh from these bags that are 50 pounds each, and they're just big enough to where they feel like a 50-pound baby with no bones, so they're just like flopping all over the place, and you're trying to chuck them in and then chuck rice hulls in to make the lauter not so bad, and then you get done with all that covered in sweat and specks of grain and pumpkin, and then you're like, all right, get the little spice cracker out. We got to go, crack 15 pounds of spice by hand for this thing, and you're just sitting there pulsating this stuff the whole time, and it's hot, and I'm griping about it, but it's just, there's certain styles of beers where it's like, when you're making like a big imperial stout and it's cold outside, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. When you're making the pumpkin beer and it's 90 something degrees out, and everyone's like, it's pool season, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. This is just really aggravating. So us, the brewers all dread making it, but we love how it comes out. So it is a labor of love, and we're happy to do it, and we'll do it 16 times over like we did this year, and just kind of suck it up for it. But like all those little things, like cracking the spices by hand, you just get a really nice spice utilization off of it, and throwing that pumpkin in, you get that little subtle portion of it. Like if we wanted to just go lazy on it, we could cut half those specialty grains out. We could just throw all those spices in a like big tea bag and run it through at the end, or to get them pre-made, and we could do all that stuff. That's not why we don't do what we do to do a lazy version of stuff. You know,
Right.
so that applies to everything across the board. And I actually had a running joke for a while that I was like, I don't think I've ever designed a single beer that we make that's easy to do. Like even the most straightforward beers we have, it has something going on that makes it harder on us to make and everything. And it just feels like there's a little portion of it that you know, like I said, this is my dream job and everything. And there's some portion of me that feels like every beer has to have some sort of bit of a thing that you got to struggle through just to kind of feel like you earned it. You know, it's just, if you're just coasting and bored up on the stand, this just doesn't feel right. It's not. I didn't get into this 12 years ago to just kind of lazily just like kind of click stuff through and just let it happen. Like, we want to have some tricks, you know, to throw our ways and stuff like that, and kind of stress out about. It just makes it more fun. It makes them feel more genuine.
For
That
sure.
is awesome.
So awesome. Yeah. I love the attention to detail and also the passion that you have for pumpkin beers. Because like what Don said, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a beer, and then people drink it and they get the salt and sugar, or the sugar cinnamon rim, and blah blah blah. Like, no, these beers are hard to make and people enjoy them. So my question is, why do you think you've been making this pumpkin beer for how many years now?
We've been doing it in package form for 10 years. This is the 10-year anniversary of it, but we've done it for 11 years, basically. It's 1 year younger than the brewery is.
Got it.
As far as a beer you could actually go buy, I've been doing it for years prior to that on a homebrew level, but yeah.
Why do you think pumpkin beers have this staying power? Because, you know, seasons come, seasons go, beer styles get popular, beer styles go away, but the pumpkin beer has been being made for so long, and so many people, especially new drinkers, you know, really look forward to this fall season. Like, why do you think that pumpkin beers have this staying power?
I think they just play into a facet of this general cultural appreciation of the fall season. And I think that is very fall itself, especially when you look at just culturally in our ancestors of just the harvest. You know, for a lot of people's lineage and stuff like that, that's just an exciting time of the year, is like that harvesty fall autumn turn, and there's a lot of iconic imagery that go with it, with pumpkins being a major part of it. And a lot of people know pumpkin pie. They love, you know, they've evolved to love, you know, pumpkin spice lattes and pumpkin spice candy. And there's, you know, then you have the addition of Halloween, you know, coming into it. So I think the whole fall autumn season gives such an iconic departure from the summer's, you know, freedom to do whatever you want. Whereas summer has the iconic, you know, references of like hot weather and the pool or the beach and all that sort of stuff. Fall and autumn just have such a stronger iconic imagery associated to them, in my opinion, at least. And I think it's just really deeply rooted in a lot of culture, and it's more widespread across the nation, you know, because I feel like here in the Southeast and all, it's like the relief from the torrential heat. You know, it's like finally we can wear jeans and not die. You know, or like oh, let's go to the pumpkin patch and pick out pumpkins for decoration. Oh, or there's a lot of, you know, there's tons of farmland around this area, and people do legitimate like harvest and pumpkin competitions, and that can spread way further than, you know, like with us here, like pool and beach culture is like really big. But, you know, if you're out in the Midwest, you know, that's not there in the summer, but the harvest season itself still exists. You know, and people still celebrate that turn to autumn with, you know, all that rustic food and those like autumn spices and that first little bit of chill in the air. And, you know, there's a ton of people out there, especially now that like, and I'm one where like Halloween's their favorite holiday, you know, so like all those like things that people eagerly look forward to have these iconic images and flavors and aromas associated with them, and pumpkin spices are right in that running. And so people get hit with it all over the place. So, you know, if you are a beer fan, the idea that you can, or you're starting to get interested in beer, you can easily wrap your mind around the idea of a pumpkin beer. Whereas, you know, a veteran or well-knowledge beer fan may understand what an Oktoberfest is, but as far as like the cultural importance and like the nuance of making an Oktoberfest versus a Vienna lager or an amber lager of any kind, you know, or even amber ale to a very new drinker, just like they all look kind of the same. they don't. I don't think it hits with the same cultural level of impact as being like it's pumpkin, it's pumpkin spice. It's stuff that people can easily associate with and easily identify and easily get excited about because they're already primed for that season to come in and have that wave of all those things to look forward to.
It's true. I'm looking forward to it. Don, are you looking forward to it?
I very much am. I have not seen them on my shelves yet, but hopefully soon.
Great. Anything else, Don?
No, I'm happy.
Chad, thank you so much for all your knowledge about you've changed my mind, I think, the way that pumpkin beers are a passion and they're well loved, and I like that farms are everywhere in America, and a harvest season is a global it's a global time. So the fact that there are certain things that hit pumpkin beers are definitely that. And I've seen a couple, but I'm looking forward to are you pouring Gorgeous at GABF this year?
We're not actually pouring at GABF. We are pouring only at the Denver Rare Beer Tasting. We did enter it into the competition though. So hopefully we can get a third medal, lined up for it. But you always go in with high hopes, but don't expect anything.
You're overdue, so
yeah, that's true.
For that one, we'll see how everything goes with it. But I'll see if I can send you guys up some so you guys can taste it. But it's been a great product for us, and I'll be perfectly honest that it's not a beer that I go drink a ton of or anything like that. Neither is pumpkin beers in general. But I think that ignoring that there's a huge population that really anticipates it and looks forward to it, you shouldn't ignore that. And in that stance too, putting our own spin on it and being really proud of what our spin is on it is something that I'm really happy that we've been able to carry on for over a decade now.
That's awesome. Wonderful.
Kudos to you for that.
Yeah, kudos, and thank you for all your thoughts and your passion about pumpkin. And thanks for being on the show. This was really great.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
One more thing. Sure. If people want to learn about the brewery or reach out to you, how can they do that? Social media, website?
Yeah, social media. Just look at anything NoDa Brewing on it, and hashtag NoDa Brewing and all the Instagrams and Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. And we also our website nodabrewing.com. We have, if you have any questions or want you to get in touch with anyone here for anything further, there's an info at nodabrewing.com, and they can basically streamline any sort of questions from whatever department it would pertain to. We try to stay pretty active on social media, and we do it if you're in the North Carolina or Charlotte area in general. We sell directly into the North and South Carolina area. So that's our current spot right now. We're doing hopefully around 22,000 barrels a year for this year, hopefully 25 next year. But we have the market idea of growing the roots deep instead of really wide and thin. So we are basically just the Carolinas. But if you're in the area right now, we have a ton of events that we run through for charitable organizations. So we have tons of events going on every week. But yeah, just check out our website, check out anything on our social media. I'm Beer Mad Chad. I don't post that much on social media, to be completely honest, but I get tagged in a ton of stuff. So yeah, that's
I like the name Beer Mad Chad too.
Yeah,
so.
I like that.
That's an old one that carried over before the brewery ever started up. I've contemplated changing it for a while, but rhyming's Chad rhymes with a bunch of stuff, so might as well run with it. So
cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And cheers. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
So Don, how do you feel about pumpkin beers now?
The reason I love co-hosting this podcast with you is that I always learn something fun and exciting. And I learned that I didn't know anything about pumpkin beer. So much thought goes into the recipe and water. I mean, I never would have thought of water chemistry in pumpkin beer recipe design. So how about you?
I didn't realize how much of a pain in the ass they are.
Yeah.
I also didn't realize, for such a pumpkin beer has only been around for what, 20, maybe not even. And they have such staying power. And there's so many different ways to make them with different spices, where you put the spices, where you put the pumpkin. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I'm now even though it's a million degrees right now, I'm craving a pumpkin beer. I think I may be going to the liquor store to go buy a few because there's some really good ones out there. You know, maybe, hey, fellow listeners, maybe go buy yourself some pumpkin beers and try them again.
Yep.
Because and appreciate the passion that goes into making them because man, I had no idea.
Is there cinnamon in this or is there not? Because maybe you taste it and it's not there, right?
How did they roast the pumpkin? Where did the pumpkin go in?
Were
How
the
was it
spices
used?
hand ground?
Hand. How many shakes
How many
did
shakes?
make this brewer? That was pretty silly.
Yeah, no, I love it. Love it. This is what I
think,
love about beer.
Me too. Because there's so many ways you can make beer and so many interesting things you learn. I mean, you learn something new every day. It's exciting.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Visit the allaboutbeer.com website and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. Again, if you're feeling generous, visit our Patreon, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. If you have any questions for the experts, email podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting the show through advertising.
Hi, this is John Hall, the editor of All About Beer, and this episode of the All About Beer podcast is brought to you by Estrella Galicia. I'm once again joined by Xavier Cabello from the brewery. And earlier we were talking about the importance of beer culture, and I want to keep on that thread. And I hope that you can continue by talking about the importance of beer culture trainings at the brewery.
I was saying how everybody in Estrella Galicia must be certified at least with the Cicerone Certified Beer Server. We have been training our workmates for many years before the Certified Beer Server was available in Spanish. But when we knew about Cicerone, we thought, oh yes, this is it. It is perfect. Why? Because we always say that we are big craft brewers. We are very demanding with our ingredients, very classic with the traditional brewing techniques, 100% family owned. Yes, true, bigger than the average craft brewer, but apart from that, we feel craft brewers. And Cicerone certification program is the main beer knowledge certification in the craft beer world, so it just fitted and was the perfect instrument to encourage people to learn and appreciate beer better. But training in company didn't feel enough. We created an online digital training platform to learn at your pace, and we offer this platform to our distributor sales forces. If we check that someone has finished the training and passed our exam, we pay for this person's certified beer server exam. We want the people working with our beers to be certified. We want them to know beer. We want them to love beer, not just sell it. So far, more than 1,200 people have certified in the first level of Cicerone thanks to our trainings. And 11 out of 26 certified Cicerones in Spain work at Estrella Galicia.
Thank you so much, and for being a sponsor of this episode. Everybody listening, to learn more about Estrella Galicia, please visit estrellagalicia.com.
Don, how can people reach out to you?
I am at the Dawn of Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram. And people can drop me an email if they want to talk about water chemistry and pumpkin beers. My email address is dawn@thedawnofbeer.com. How about you, Em?
I am at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is www.pintsandpanels.com. This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Keep squashing those pumpkin beers.